Today on Impact Quantum, we sit down with Shahaf Asban, mathematical physicist, head of research, and the man who makes quantum sensing almost sound like jazz. From drum kits to deep learning, Shahaf takes us on a wild ride through quantum technologies, AI intersections, and why your laptop might crash if it hears Janet Jackson. No PhD required, just curiosity and maybe a strong cup of coffee. Let's get entangled. But first, 10 seconds of dubstep.
Hello. Hello, and welcome back to Impact Quantum, the podcast where we explore the emerging field of quantum computing, the entire ecosystem, where you don't really need to bring a PhD, you just need to bring your curiosity. And the most curious, quantum curious person I know is with me, as always, Candice Gahuli. How's it going, Candice?
It's great. Thank you so much. I'm really excited about today.
Cool.
We're going to be speaking with Shahaf Asban, who is, he's at Classiq, and he is the head of research and the principal scientist, and he knows about sensing. So I'm really excited about that. We're going to talk about sensing today. You know, we've talked about that before and how we wanted to get someone who could tell us all about it.
Like quantum sensing and whatnot. Yeah, it was a term I was largely unfamiliar with. So welcome to the show. And so tell us,
Thank you.
What is quantum sensing?
Wow, straight into the deepest. Yeah, quantum sensing. Well, what is sensing in general? It's actually quantifying the interaction between two systems, which one of them is very well familiar. You're very well familiarized with, and you can quantify to your needs what is the effect of one system on the other. So that's done classically, for example, when you insert a thermometer into your mouth and you try to estimate your temperature. Essentially, you're raising the temperature in the thermometer into the temperature of your body, because your body is a much larger system. So it relies on the fact that you're actually interacting with much smaller or much more reactive system that can transfer some of the average data that is collected surrounding it. So quantum sensing is essentially the same, but also using the quantum properties of quantum physics, essentially. So it means it could get smaller, more sensitive, and also introduce other things. You can use quantum features such as superposition or entanglement with the environment. And with these, you can actually obtain more information in some cases.
Okay. Now we should go back a little bit, start at the beginning. But we got excited because it's something that a lot of people have discussed,
mentioned, and kind of in passing and whatnot. Yeah.
Right, and as ancillary, and I really wanted something I wanted to really understand it. But I'd like to first, if we could we hear about more of your journey? Where did you start, and how did you get yourself into mathematics, and then physics, and then how did you get yourself into quantum? What was? Tell us about your path.
Wow, I have quite an interesting journey. I'm not a typical physicist or typical anything. I started from essentially music. As you can see, maybe you can see in the camera behind me, there's drums here and recording studio. So I started my journey in music essentially, and then got deeper and deeper into recording, and from recording to acoustics and algorithms for sound. And from that, started studying electrical engineering, and then fell in love with math and physics. And then obtained my master's and my PhD in physics, essentially studying what you'd call stochastic processes, essentially everything that's random. And the theory there is extremely fascinating and interesting, and it raises a lot of questions about what is intrinsically random or what's not. And then I continued to my postdoc of open quantum systems. That got me more into the sensing and spectroscopy, to be more exact, with the Mukammel lab in the UCI. And I think that's about it. That's how I got really into non-equilibrium systems that are out of equilibrium, that are quantum and interact with the quantum world, and what kind of information we can get from those systems. To be more specific, it could be either photons or electrons or whatever quantum particle that you use to probe properties of matter and state of matter. And then slowly I got more into the information theory behind that. It attracted me a lot. What can be studied? How can we quantify essentially how much information can I gain, and can I actually say that a quantum probe would do a better job, or bound to have I don't know, less restrictions or more accuracy? And then you get more into the information theoretic description, which is essentially also the base of, as I see it, a lot of statistical physics. Statistical physics can be, even classical, can be formulated in terms of information theory. And the same goes for quantum. So I dove deeper into that. And then I got my position in USF. And after some time, I wanted to go back to Israel and joined Classiq.
Interesting. So I think it's fascinating. You started in music and you found your way into basically advanced physics, right? Like that's an interesting journey. And I don't think people realize how much math is actually in music theory. Like I was watching a YouTube video the other day about, apparently there was some brand of hard drive, some brand of laptop in the early 2000s or 90s that would crash if Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation was played.
Okay.
If it was played loud enough. Basically, it turned out that they never specify the brand, but when they showed a bunch of people testing out this urban legend, they're all Dells, right? And so what somebody had kind of reverse engineered, like a music theory guy, and it was all math. It was interesting. It was basically had to do with the tune of E and how that the frequency was tweaked in that song, and basically it just happened to resonate with the hard drive when these are before solid state drives.
Really?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's and a number of people have done stories on this. Raymond Chen, I think, was the guy who Raymond Chen is a longtime Microsoft engineer, and his blog always like has these weird anecdotes from Microsoft history. And then somebody else who was there on YouTube, I think it was Dave Plummer, corroborated it and then explained the whole thing and like ran a test of the hard drive and basically found a certain frequency that would, and then this music theory guy explained it all, like from a musician's point of view. It was, I mean, utterly fascinating. And I was like, I never really thought about that music as much, like how heavy math it is. So, but yeah, it's fascinating. You should definitely look it up. It's a fun.
I will.
It's a fun story. Yeah.
Fun fact. Yeah.
And,
so go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jens.
I was just say, so, by the way, I totally just like typed something in to find out about the Rhythm Nation thing, and it's totally real. It's in Janet Jackson's '89 hit Rhythm Nation, and Microsoft published a blog about it in 2022. So that's fantastic. And it's absolutely true. My father was a physicist and a mathematician, but he also was a musician. And so we've always understood that there is this tremendous connection between music and math. But then where you went with it, how do you explain what you do to people who are not in your field, non-technical folks?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think it depends on the kind of people I'm talking to. But generally, I'd say that I'm working in a software company. Classiq is a software company, essentially, and we're developing something. Well, it's hard to explain. Now you put me in a spot here. So
But I'm
we're
sure you have
developing the
non-technical
layer.
members. I'm sorry, I cut you off. I'm sure you have non-technical members of your family that you're like, well, what does he do? Like, what's your job? And
Not that many. My brother's
oh,
physicist.
okay,
Yeah. Yeah, but I'd say that there's several, more than one paradigm for computing. I mean, we're all familiar with the classical computer and how it works to a certain level, but also other paradigms for computing. Those computing paradigms could be universal, like what you'd expect your computer to be able to run any program. It could be long, it could be complex, it could be not worth your while, but you can essentially run anything on your computer. And there are also purpose machines that can do one thing very well. And there's also a new paradigm for computers, quantum computers, that actually tackle this challenge of computing very complicated problems for classical computer, but relying on different math or different on different computation process. And in Classiq, that's essentially what we're doing. We're building this layer to help non-physicists or non-PhDs in general in technical field to be able to write as smooth as possible software that can be uploaded to what we today see more as an experiment. It's an experiment that goes commercial. So this layer of actually helping people talking to these machines, those experiments, and making them useful is not yet existing. And that's what we're doing. We're tackling this problem, which is actually very difficult. Even try to think about a compiler or something that takes certain sentences that you write into your code and then translate it to the machine, to a sequence of operations inside your computer. In quantum computing, it's not that straightforward. There are multiple ways, not even unique, how you interpret it, and it could be more efficient or less efficient. So our job is essentially to characterize it and help bring essentially the best of what can be brought in quantum computers. And what I'm doing there, the head of research, I guess. So what I'm doing there is looking 2-3 years into the future and trying to predict and place what is needed to be developed in a product, and make it happen, which means collaborating with researchers and professors throughout the world, other companies that we can also partner with for certain projects, and making this progress more efficient towards the future of quantum computing.
Okay. Okay. So you bridge mathematical physics and deep learning and even neural networks. For a beginner, what's the connection between quantum and AI?
Interesting. A beginner with some kind of a technical background, or beginner that's about to embark their bachelor degree and wants to get a grasp of what to get into and how?
I like both ideas. So you can start with whichever one you like. If you like the layman one, we go that way first. But then I do want to talk about how people can start to get in and get involved. So whichever.
Right. So essentially, learning algorithms, statistical algorithms are not that new. I mean, we know that GPT-5 was just launched and everything is very hot in this field, but it's not that new. Statistical algorithms began, I think, in the late 50s or even later. Vladimir Vapnik, all this work around vector machines And if you take a look at it, it was a rough journey. It took several decades until we started to see some results there. So statistical learning is all about essentially, as I see it at least, is learning changing parameters, like approximating a function. Every algorithm can be looked at as a function of multiple variables. So what you do is you expose your algorithm, you expose your system to many examples, and you try to refine those parameters until you become as close as possible to the target that you want. For example, if you want to minimize your error with respect to identifying a dog or a cat, so that's what you'll do. You'll put that as your error function that you'll try to minimize as possible. So you're approximating an answer. It's not certain. It's probabilistic. So in this sense, you can look at it as also as something close to quantum software, where it also gives you a probabilistic answer at the end. But it's completely different, because quantum algorithms, on the other hand, while being probabilistic, because of the nature of quantum physics, you're not essentially refining variables. There are some algorithms in quantum that you refine values of variables to approximate your answer. These are called variational quantum algorithms, but it's only a tiny bit of what's going to be, or what is speculated to be, the most helpful. For example, the Shor's algorithm, or quantum Fourier transform. Those algorithms are essentially, you don't refine any variables. You program exactly what you want. Yeah, the answer at the end is probabilistic, because you have to sample the quantum circuit multiple times, and each time you get essentially a different realization of the process. So in this sense, it is probabilistic, but it's completely different kind of probabilistic. I think you're muted, Frank.
Oh,
I am muted. Oh,
oh my goodness.
I think that's an interesting switch, right? Because it's a big paradigm shift. Isn't so much from, I mean, obviously quantum is a big paradigm shift, but I think one of the big aspects of that is the switch from deterministic computing to probabilistic computing, which is, fortunately, I think AI is kind of and ML have kind of walked us into that as a concept and made it more acceptable. But the whole idea of, you're not guaranteed a particular outcome. You just get probabilities of a particular outcome. And then that opens up. It's fascinating, because it's a big paradigm shift for people who are used to, traditional or conventional classical computing, right? I think it's definitely one of the hardest things for me to get my head around was that.
Yep. I guess as a physicist, you have to learn to live with uncertainty starting the first degre, and then
Right,
afterwards
exactly.
in the PhD, you don't even know if you're going to get a position. So in life, you have to accept uncertainty as well. So I guess we're used to that.
I guess so. I mean, and it's also interesting that a lot of people who are in technology, the two most common hobbies I've noticed is music or carpentry, right? I find that kind of fascinating. There's probably some kind of deep, profound reason for that, but I just find it interesting that one of our previous guests had said that something very interesting, and he said that if you isolate a qubit or whatever you're measuring from the rest of the universe, it's roughly what he said. Candace can keep me honest here. And that makes for an awesome qubit, but for a terrible quantum sensor, which I kind of chewed on that for a while. And I'm like, I mean, that makes sense, right? Because if you want to measure something in isolation for quantum information kind of reasons, that makes sense. But if you want to not have it, do that, where you want to, sense something remotely, that makes sense. Am I on the right track? Because very often, every time I think, speaking of uncertainty, every time I think I get my head around a concept in quantum computing, we learn something new, and it's like, oh crap, I was wrong.
Yeah. Uncertainty. So you'd like to talk about uncertainty more?
I don't know if it's uncertainty, but I think like what makes a good quantum sensor, really? It seems like it's the opposite of what makes a good qubit. That was the lesson I took away.
Oh, right. Then in this sense, I guess the answer is depends on what you're trying to measure. In some cases,
That's
you
fair.
would like a single particle with certain properties, and to have it interacting strongly or as much as possible with the object that you're trying to measure, because then the effect on this single particle, you want to call it a qubit, call it a qubit. In this sense, the effect would be the strongest, and your probability of measuring the effect would increase. So the less it interacts, the worse it is. Um, but in other cases, you would like to engineer properties of multiple particles and how they behave together when they interact with another object. So it depends. It depends on what you're trying to measure, what kind of property.
Interesting. So is quantum sensing, I wouldn't say the same thing, but a big part of quantum sensing is probably entanglement.
Well, when you say quantum sensing, then you better have something quantum there. Otherwise, it's just
Right.
either a wave or a particle or not, doesn't have a phase or something. So you'd better try to find some quantum, something that actually, this is actually one of the more sensitive points on each one of those papers that are sent to review on sensing is, does it really have to be quantum? Can I find a classical probe that's much more efficiently made and much cheaper, and doesn't have to be, I don't know, cooled or isolated or controlled, and can do the same tricks? And this is in many cases not so easy to answer. And in many cases, the answer is yes, you can do it classically. But when it comes to entanglement, that's like one of the first hooks that you'd know that there is no classical analog if you're using this entanglement. I mean, no is a hard, it's a hard word, but it's most likely that it would be very hard to find a classical analog if you're using the entanglement between particles to measure something.
I guess you're right. Like it depends on what you're trying to measure, right? So let's say I'm trying to
Mhm.
find gold, right? There's probably ground penetrating radar, other ways to find gold in the ground, or oil, or whatever, something that's hidden, right? It's probably there's probably other ways to do it, magnetometers and all sorts of fancy stuff, right? That'd be a classical approach. But that's
Right.
interesting. I've always been fascinated by the notion of entanglement, right? Like, because
Mhm.
um, and I'm not sure what I know is, where is the pop science and where is the reality? I know I'm somewhere in the middle, and I think for one of these things is like, one of the pop science things is that entanglement, the information travels faster than the speed of light. Superliminally would be the $5 word on that. And but apparently there's a catch, and it's like it's not exactly. And then I got a headache, and then I had to stop looking at it.
Well, that's a very um, known statement about traveling faster than light and all this kind of stuff. I don't like it at all.
Right.
Um, Essentially, as quantum physics sees it, the minute that you unleash your quantum entangled quantum particles, they are essentially the same system. So you can't
Gotcha.
really say that the information between them flows faster than light. It's just they're just connected.
Right.
Just looking at it at the same system. You can't really separate them mathematically or um, uh, um, conceptually.
So that's the
Um,
catch.
right, right. But you can't signal your information faster than light. Even if something happens to one of the entangled particles and they are very much distant from one another, they cannot send information from one another faster than light. So there it is.
Okay, that actually makes sense. Once particles are entangled, how long are they entangled? Does the entanglement naturally decay, or probably it depends, or is it like permanent, or is it, I don't know, like I guess it would depend on what you're entangling, right? Like because different types of particles could be entangled.
Right. So let's talk about, for example, coupled photons. You have two photons. Each of them are flying in the speed of light towards opposite directions in the universe, for example, and they're entangled, very well entangled. As long as they don't interact with anything, nothing will happen. They will stay a closed system, which is exactly the same. Things decay when they start interacting with the external world, with other particles. So
Gotcha.
yeah, and that's actually how you use them to probe things. You see how much things decayed, and you can infer something on the system they
Oh,
interact with.
interesting. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Candace, you better ask a question before my headache returns.
Well, let me ask you this. What are some ways quantum technology might change everyday life in the next 5 to 10 years, even for people who don't work in science?
Wow. That's very profit. But I guess if you ask me, I have a lot of faith in the area of synthesizing materials and quantum chemistry and quantum simulations of matter, and this touches us all in various places, from drug design to materials for airplanes, for whatnot. I mean, once you can start today, it's really hard to predict properties of matter when the simulation is very much limited. Each electron you do want to add to your simulation, you either have to give up some of the quantum description and do some heuristics or approximations, and then you lose a lot of information this way. And there's a lot of hand waving and guessing and expertise of people that are doing it for many years that have a gut feeling where things are important and when they're not. But essentially, if you'd like to assimilate material from quantum first principles, each electron that you'd add to the system, you have to double your memory and your computer and your CPU capacity. So essentially, you're stuck. You're stuck at few tens of electrons at best, and you can't really think about how how do I synthesize a drug that can couple to a protein somewhere and do something useful from this, or not even a protein. Protein is a huge thing. You'd want to synthesize, for example, you'd like to create a small molecule which is very helpful for some disease, and you already have the prescription, but you have very low yield. And for this purpose, the customer would have to pay a lot of money because the companies would have to sort particles, and that's hard. And along with the good material that is inserted into the medicine, there's also a lot of byproducts that's unwanted, but it's kind of the process of the chemistry that takes place there. Imagine that you have quantum computer that can actually simulate that, and you can increase the yield and the purity, and therefore it will cheapen the preparation period and the success rate, and therefore the purity of what we take. So that's only one place that I can give you an example, but I'm sure that we can discuss just about that for another hour or so.
No, that's true. Like it's a very, I mean, it's not very dense information wise, right? In terms of like quantum, right? And that's really why we started this show back up, was, whether or not it's quote unquote quantum computing is real now, I think is up for debate. I think that's completely up for debate. I think it's real. But I think that the jobs of the next decade or so are going to be increasingly touching quantum. Again, whether or not quantum becomes real in the next 5, 10 years, but things are going to shift more in that direction, whether they're quantum inspired algorithms, whether it's quantum simulated systems. So I think my advice is to start learning hard stuff early because one, you do it before it's cool, and two, when it does become cool, you're ready, right? I saw this with the internet early in my career, right? When I switched from writing Visual Basic 3 applications for investment banks into web programming, everyone thought I was a little crazy. Turns out I was right. And when I switched about a decade or so ago to AI and data science, what it was called then, everyone thought I was a little bit batty, right? Turns out I was right. Now, before you think I have an inflated ego, I also invested heavily in Silverlight, Windows Phone, and Windows desktop apps. So, like, I'm not always right. So I'm just saying, like, I'm either really right or really, really wrong.
You're experimentalist by nature.
Yes, I'm experimentalist by nature. Yeah. So 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right?
Yep.
So let me ask you, if you could bust one myth or misconception about quantum technology, what would it be?
Wow, we have so many of them going around today. So, one myth.
And if you can't narrow it down to one, maybe top 3. Because there's a lot of pop science misinformation. I don't want to knock on pop science because it gets a lot of people interested in things, right? Like I don't want to. I mean, I remember watching PBS and Nova documentaries as a kid, and just utterly fascinated. Whether it was Carl Sagan or whether it was Brian Greene or Michio Kaku. I forget how to pronounce the name, but like I still enjoy watching them, right? And at the time, as far as I knew, they were right. And I think they're mostly right. But, there's some things you have to gloss over, I think, to make it a palatable entertainment project. But sorry, I interrupted your train of thought.
Okay, there are multiple directions to go with. I guess that I'll go with a lot of people that I meet and think about quantum computers, they immediately imagine those heavy chandeliers underground that has to be cooled down and stuff like this. And that's I think that this is quantum computing, and they don't see how this becomes useful since we can't carry I don't know, quantum technology on us or at home or whatever. So first of all, a lot of the parts that are essentially operated in your computer right now, they are a product of quantum theory. Already in the 70s and 80s, and you should know quantum theory to actually produce those classical computers. So that's one thing. Another thing is that a lot of the quantum hardware that is actually manufactured these days, they don't really need to be cooled down. So in this sense, I guess my main message here is that think about quantum computers today as AI 30, 40 years ago, when we were still thinking about architectures, what would be the next stage to scale it up. And as we progressed, we understood, and the hardware became better and better. We understood new problems emerged. For example, like the vanishing gradients and stuff like that only became available after we were able to concatenate a lot of those systems because we had enough compute. So what I'm saying is that it's a journey. We're there. We're advancing. It's not here tomorrow, but it's progressing very nicely. And ever since it started to become more commercially interesting, I would say that the progress is also increased beyond the expectations that we had a few years ago. So I'd say be patient, follow this closely, and 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 that's about it.
No, that's good advice. That's good advice. And I mean, one of the things that's very big as we're recording this, ChatGPT 5 came out yesterday.
Yep.
And again, it's too early to see, but a lot of the initial hype seems to be it's really good at coding. But again, early in the hype cycle for this one.
Yeah.
But that's what I think is that I think as people ponder what the future of careers look like because of AI, I think it's also, I think quantum is an interesting, I wouldn't say backup plan, but you should always know what do they say on the airplane? Always like make sure you know that where the nearest exit is. Like you always have a backup plan, right?
Right.
And I think that unfortunately, I think because of AI, people are going to learn. I learned that lesson because of bad things that happened early in my career. But I think there's a lot of people going to go through that now is, make sure you have a backup plan.
Right.
Yeah. Whether
Right.
it's, just make sure it's on silver light, right? At least.
I really would like to go back to a concept that I don't really understand fully. The idea of noisy, the idea of noise, the idea of noisy systems. Can you explain this, like really basic, unpack it for me, and why this is so important in quantum tech?
Right. So there are literally multiple sources for noise in electronics, even in classical electronics. So essentially what you do classically, you have a transistor that's locked either on the one state or the zero state, and of course it can flip, but we're trying to lock it as far as possible with electric potential such that you have, for a given temperature, as little fluctuations in this information stored as possible. So I guess that quantum mechanically it becomes a little bit more difficult. What happens there is that you have a qubit. Qubit has phase. The problem, like I told you before, if you'd want to do anything meaningful in a quantum algorithm or something that actually justifies the computer being quantum, you'd better entangle or make qubits interact. So how do you do that? You do it with 2-qubit gates. You do it with laser pulses in all sort of architecture, essentially. So when I said laser pulses, I was thinking about certain architecture, but essentially you'd have to give the qubits or the quantum systems a way to interact with one another. Otherwise, you don't really need a quantum computer because the state of the system is just a product state. So you don't really need a quantum computer for that. When you do that, you introduce a lot of noise into the system. The noise can come also not just from the 2-qubit coupling, but also from temperatures, from crosstalk. For example, imagine that you're doing something to qubit here, but somewhere right here, and for the listeners, I'm actually pointing with my hands in the air. In some distant location, another qubit feels something of the operation that you've done to the first qubit. And this is what we call the crosstalk. They actually interrupt one another. So that's another source of error. Another source of error is in the measurement. The measurement itself can insert a lot of errors. In some machines also, it's one of the most significant source of errors, actually the measurement itself, when you measure the result. So there are multiple causes for noise in such systems. And I think that one of the greatest challenges today is to bring these noise levels to be low enough such that when we insert this extra error correction algorithms or protocols there, they do not insert by operating more noise to actually kill the entire calculation. So it's a threshold problem. If you'd have to reduce the noise levels below some threshold for the error correction to be actually able to be useful. And I think that this is one of the main challenges today.
Okay. Okay.
Interesting. How do you think we're going to get past those challenges?
Well, you do see steady reports of increased performance by various hardware providers. Well, I see them all over LinkedIn, right? Because I'm in this community, but I see a lot of architectures being proposed and a lot of new companies emerging from universities to a whole new kind of technologies for building one computer. So I think it's inevitable that we'll get past it.
Interesting. Would you be willing to hazard a guess when we will at least see some progress in that space, or we're seeing progress in that today?
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, are we seeing good progress in that today? Is it accelerated?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. For example, I just know about this new company that in Israel that actually develops a new kind of controllers that's actually inserted into where the quantum processor is actually kept, and by doing that, they actually reduce a lot of the wires that has to be inserted for the control, and the wires insert a lot of temperature fluctuations into the system. So by eliminating the amount of wires and doing the logical control within or inside where the QPU is actually being held, you can prevent a lot of fluctuations and noise. So there are multiple ways to attack this, and I'm really curious to see which one will prevail.
Interesting. There'll probably realistically probably some combination thereof, but I didn't think of the physical aspect of it, right? Like you always think about like just
right.
Crazy woo-woo way to fix it, but just simply removing wires, removing the need for wires.
Yeah. Microsoft on the other hand, Microsoft on the other hand is working on a completely different approach. Microsoft is developing something that's called a topologically protected qubits, which means that it's a quantum state that, in theory, no matter how much you disturb it, it will be protected. Because of the topology of the system, it has to remain protected, and this is also another approach to try to bypass this noise problem.
Interesting. It's all very fascinating how this all is coming together. How do you answer the question? Because quantum systems, I don't know how much they cost roughly, but I imagine they're not cheap. So at some point, you have to get the signature of somebody who's in a corner office. Some people like to call out the hippo, right? The highest paid person's opinion. Like you have to obviously win over the hippo. How do you do that in a quantum system?
Right. So now let me put on the salesperson hat. Right. No, I'm joking. Well, currently the business model that we operate with is we all got used to the fact that probably in your home computer you don't have the computability to train, for example, the next GPT-5, right? So you're used to doing cloud computing. You're used to using online platforms, uploading your code or whatever, getting the results, and we're fine with that, because the more compute that we demand. There's some noise here. Okay. We got used to the fact that our yeah, thank you. That the complexity of the algorithm, so the complexity of the answer that we are trying to that we want to receive is exceeding the technology that we can actually have at our homes, and we're fine with that. So the business model today is that quantum computers are also going to be in centers probably in vicinity to classical HPC centers as well. And you can also do very fast hybrid computations between the QPU, CPU, GPU, TPU. There are multiple of architectures that emerged in the last few years also. And I guess that the future, at least the future that I see in the next 2 years, is this cloud computing business model.
That makes sense because you're willing to pay per use or however you use it.
Right.
I mean, it makes sense, right? It's kind of like everything is old is new again, right? The idea of mainframe time sharing, right?
Mhm.
Cloud computing is kind of like the 21st century version of that, right? Where,
Mhm.
no, that's a good answer, right? Because you can, if for some reason I also have a background in tech sales, so that's why I'm curious. Like, how do you pitch this? Because this is not easy stuff to get. I like to think I'm a smart person. I'm not going to put Candace on the spot, and she can confirm or deny that. But it takes a while to get your head around. I've been trying to get my head around this, for a little bit of time, and so I just can't imagine, someone who may not be technical. How do you get this past them? And I think the cloud approach is a reasonable one, right? Because you're either going to see value or you're not going to see value. And
Right.
if you see value, the follow-up conversations are going to be pretty easy. I wouldn't say easy, but they'll evolve in that direction. If you don't see value, well, those conversations are going to be super easy because you're not going to hear back from them.
Right.
So I always was wondering, like, how do you sell a quantum system, right? And that's kind of like, one of the things that Candace and I have talked about in the past is like, you're going to need marketers that are going to be quantum savvy, right? They don't have to have a PhD. They may not understand Heisenberg formulas, but they can understand what this means is a different shift in how computing is done.
They
And
can
this
understand
isn't,
prices.
and the difference in prices, yeah. But if history is any guide, the prices won't be so dramatically high, right? Forever.
Right. But if I'd had to pitch it to a certain hippo, for example,
Right.
using your terminology,
Yeah, feel free.
then what I would do as the background research is to know what kind of problems they're dealing with. For example, in logistics or something like that, and then quantify end to end the service that quantum would give them with the computation prices and everything, and amount of hours expected to be computed, and algorithms to be written and stuff like that. And then if we can get to the bottom line where using quantum can actually yield revenue, increased revenue with respect to the classical one, then it's a no-brainer. So
Right.
of course they're going to choose that.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And it's a spectrum, right? It's not a simple yes or no. It's going to be like, did we get enough value? Was the juice worth the squeeze
Right.
of that? And I think that holds true for AI. These are very similar to AI conversations, right?
Right.
The hype out there, and the quantum hype isn't quite at AI levels yet.
You
Um,
think?
Only because AI levels are just so high. I mean, they're in the stratosphere, right? But it's one of those things where there's a lack of understanding. It's really, they're very similar in a lot of ways. There's a lack of understanding of the core kind of concepts.
Mhm.
There's a lot of hype about what it can do, and there's a lot of hype about, not really. It doesn't work all the time, right? Right now, I would say in the AI space, you have multiple layer cakes of hype, right? There's obviously the foundation ML side, then you have the neural network side, now you have the LLM side, now you have like the frontier models, right, of that, right? And like we're keep going higher, Grok, GPT-5, Claude, right? These are all things that are just building up on the hype wave now. Hype waves tend to behave predictably, right? They tend to go up and then they tend to go down. I don't think quantum has enough layers in that layer cake to be as high as AI.
But I think we really need to be careful as scientists, as commercial leaders. We have to be careful. We have to be very transparent about the abilities right now, and the fact that we're essentially studying those algorithms, we're studying its abilities. We seem to have a very good grasp of where we know it's going to be useful, but quantifying it end to end with costs, and finding more regions where this can be helpful beyond, for example, physical simulations or chemical simulations, or some sort of optimization problems. We still have a long way to go, side by side with the architectures being developed and the hardware being developed, also algorithmic and software learning on the available systems to actually squeeze them more, and see, and also theoretically, and understand if where we can actually get more out of them, and not promise empty promises, as I see some people in the commercial area of quantum are doing, which is dangerous, because if we set expectations so high that tomorrow it's going to solve all the world's problems,
Right.
then essentially we're setting expectations that are not realistic, and it's bound to explode and actually be an inhibitor of the quantum, let's say, computing advancements. So we'd have to be very
You
sincere.
have to be more sensible, right?
Right.
Because I remember
Right.
the .com boom, and it was like .com this, .com that. They're gonna, and I think eventually a lot of those visions came to pass eventually, but it wasn't realistic, right? Like, pets.com, right? Like, right? How it's at the time, especially, I'm not going to go on my dial-up modem and order dog food for Rover because, and then have it shipped when there really was no shipping infrastructure, logistics like Amazon has today, right? Now, over time that developed, but there's definitely parts that, and that's why you had pets.com kind of die a horrible death, right? Like, and I'm just putting that in because any .com that failed would be, there was furniture.com. I remember that one, which was like, really? Like, that's one of the last things, right? You would expect to be able to do virtually, right? Oh, people do it. People do it now.
There's also books.com. I mean, really,
Oh, yeah.
and that, eventually grew itself into Overstock, and then grew itself into Amazon, and, and then just whoever was bigger swallowed up everybody else.
I remember I was the first webmaster at barnesandnoble.com. So yes, that is not everybody won that fight.
That's correct. But before we wrap up, because I know we're almost there, I really still want to ask a question about mentorship, because I think it's really important. Is there anyone that was a really great mentor for you, or have you been able to be a mentor for others at any point in the journey that you were on to get to where you are today?
Wow, I think that this is I think my mind right now is racing exponentially fast. I mean, there are so many people involved in getting me where I am, and also a lot of people that I have helped, because I think it's something that actually does a lot of good to you to mentor people also. It forces you also to develop this I don't know if it forces you, but I guess in the technical world, it's easy to stay technical. And when you mentor people, when you help people, it connects you in a more human way, and that gives you a whole different direction, viewpoint on things. And I think it was very helpful for me during my PhD, during my postdoc, to actually help other people. And as for mentors, I'd say that I don't have anyone official, but there are people that I'm constantly in touch with, and from different fields, even sales, by the way. And I always probe them to see different viewpoints, because I'd like to get as many as possible before I move forward. So that's me. I can give you one name, though. I can't give you one name.
Cool. Anywhere people can go to find out more information about you and what your company does?
I'd say you can start on LinkedIn, on our
Okay.
webpage, also on Classiq webpage.
And that's spelled Classiq.
Right.
Right.
Classiq Technologies. There's also a rapper called Classiq, so you
is
might
there?
hit that if you're looking at it in Google. So you should click Classiq Technologies.
Okay, we'll do that. Which is kind of funny given your musical background. So,
Right. Right.
awesome.
Good circle. Good circle. I enjoyed it.
On this episode. It's been a great show. Great having you. And I will let our AI finish the show.
And that's a wrap on this quantum escapade with Shahaf Asban, musician turned physicist who somehow made entanglement, noise, and quantum compilers sound almost fun. Whether you're now rethinking your career in classical computing, or just impressed that Janet Jackson can crash a hard drive, remember, the future is uncertain, but delightfully probabilistic. Until next time, keep your qubits cool and your curiosity entangled. Cheers.